So for this next half an hour, we're going to be discussing something that is prevalent for a lot of people, but is not necessarily spoken about all that openly by professional musicians who, as their job, walk on stage in front of lots of people. And there's a sort of slight mysterium around what is going through the mind and heart of people who do walk on stage. But equally, the idea of confidence from the perspective of a teacher. So we are discussing performance anxiety. That's a label for something that is a huge range of experiences for different people. It can be things like your heart goes incredibly fast, or your hands start sweating, which is something that definitely does happen to me, but happened to me a lot when I was younger. And actually, to tell a quick story, when I was about 8 or 9, I was playing the last movement of Bruch Concerto. It was a piece that was way too difficult for me at that time, but I was managing my way through it, and I was getting really sweaty hands. So I was already, obviously experiencing the sensation of nerves at the age of 8 or 9. And what my mum and I decided would be an excellent thing to do would be to add talcum powder to my hands, because that would kind of dry up the perspiration. But it was a Suzuki concert, and the Suzuki concert lasts probably at least 2 hours, and I was playing at the very end. So I sat there adding more and more talcum powder to my hands for a period of 2 hours, at the end of which I got up and started playing and fell off the violin on the first chord, and was so distraught and unhappy afterwards, in floods of tears. So if you care about something a lot, and if the thing that you care about is something that is difficult to do, as playing all instruments is difficult to do, the likelihood is that you're going to experience some kind of relationship to anxiety towards that thing. And today we're just so honored, and I personally am so grateful, but on behalf of the foundation too, we are so grateful to have such incredible people, such intelligent people, but most importantly with this subject, such honest and open people willing to expose their vulnerabilities, to open up their hearts to all of you about this very personal subject. So we have Elena Urioste and Tom Poster. We also have the cellist Lara van der Heijden, and we have the teacher and violinist Rachel Cooper. And I'm just deeply grateful that they're all here to share their thoughts with us. So we're going to hear first from the violinist Elena Urioste.
Well, real quick before I get super open and vulnerable, one of the best silly pieces of advice that I'm going to share with all of you, despite it being like very juvenile, because it did quite help me. I remember it was maybe the first or second time I'd ever played at Carnegie Hall in the big hall, which is just like the most magical and terrifying place in the world. You just think of all the people who've been on that stage. But actually someone else who was playing, I think it was maybe the cellist Paul Katz, I can't even remember. He saw that I was very nervous, and I was just sort of like looking up at him lost and like, oh my God, what do I do? And he's like, someone once told me, just imagine all the butts that have been on that toilet in your dressing room before you walked on to play. And I loved it because it made me remember that like everyone probably poops before a concert too, including and Oistra and Nicola Benedetti and Tom, and like literally
I don't.
Everyone gets nervous and probably feels sick to their stomach, and like everyone poops. So that's my first story. I do get quite nervous, and when I'm in a right frame of mind, I do like to reason with myself, telling myself that it is because I care, and the day I stop being nervous is maybe the day I should consider not performing anymore, because maybe it'll mean I'm less invested or something. But of course, reason like that doesn't really get me that far when I am in the heat of my nerves and I'm like panicking and my hands are sweating and like I need to visit the bathroom like every 20 seconds. I would say my most dramatic story of nerves, maybe I even told you guys this already, I don't remember, came when I think I was 24 5, I was going through kind of a tough personal time to kind of like, well, whatever, that's irrelevant. And I was playing Brahms Concerto, which is a piece that I've had a very complicated relationship with. I have like a lot of psychological work to do there, kind of untangling as to why. I think it boils down to the fact that I had a shaky relationship with the teacher with whom I learned it, and then I had an extremely shaky first performance with it. So I think a lot of my nerves about it are tied up with those associations of feeling just so out of control and shaky throughout the whole first performance, which was just like a student recital, playing with piano, but I was just miserable the whole time. And I don't think that's ever totally been unwoven from that piece for me. Anyway, I was set to play it with an orchestra. I was 25 years old, and I was just having like kind of a mental breakdown, honestly, that whole weekend. I was so nervous. I felt horrible about myself, like debilitating insecurity. Would come off from rehearsal and just sob. I thought I couldn't do it. I thought I would have to cancel. So I actually had to call my parents. They drove down like 7 hours or something. My mom had to like put my gown on my body and come up to the wings and like push me on stage. And I made her stand there, like just peeking out from the wings. And I just needed my mommy. And I got through it. I don't think it was, particularly good, but I got from the beginning to the end, and I bowed and I clapped and they paid me. But it was awful. And I a lot of it had to do with that piece and that set of circumstances, but I have a feeling that those feelings were not isolated. I have certainly felt versions of them before. So that was probably the lowest point for me. I can come back to this and let other people have a turn, but it honestly, I'm such a broken record, but it wasn't until I dove deeper into yoga and really learned about concrete ways that I could use the breath, like intentional breathing, to help me, that I started to not conquer my nerves, because they're definitely not conquered, but kind of have a more healthy relationship with them. I've moved out of the stage of trying to deny that they're there or let them totally overwhelm me, but I have in my toolbox, this breathing exercise and this visualization to help me work with them and hopefully retain the kind of like exciting adrenaline portion of them, but to work through, literally breathe through the more destructive, like shame spirally part of them. So yeah, we can touch on that later, but yeah, I'd love to hand it off to someone else.
And thank you so much for being so unbelievably open and honest about all of that. It's hugely fascinating, and I think always affirming for people to hear another story of something that so many people have definitely experienced and been through. I would say it's one of the most prevalent questions that I receive when being around students, and especially through those teenage years, but into music college, university. It's a lot of questioning and battling over who we are and our worth, and how tied that is to how well the last concert went. So yeah, just so fascinating to hear. Tom, would you like to just say a few words now as well? That would be absolutely wonderful.
I think one of the things about feeling anxious and nervous is it often makes us feel very lonely, like we're experiencing these things and that everyone else is kind of sorted. And even if we know logically that's not the case, it can just be a very sort of isolating thing. And I think the thing I really wanted to say is that, I mean, most of us are kind of anxious most of the time about one thing or another. In fact, just before this meeting, before this Zoom call, I was suddenly feeling like really nervous and thinking, what if I don't have anything to say? And I was sort of getting a bit sweaty, and I was like, actually, we're all doing our best all the time, but, often it's a bit of a struggle. And I think just remembering that we're all in it together, we all worry because we all care. And I think the problem is that a lot of the time we we don't exactly pretend not to, but in order to do the things that we do most publicly, we don't show that. So when we get up on stage, we make this big act of being very strong. And I mean, even worse, I think, is our presence sort of on social media and stuff, where we're curating this very strong image, you know. And often, you know, what goes on behind the scenes doesn't often bear any resemblance to what's coming out in public. You know, and during this period of lockdown, Elena and I have been making, some of you may have seen these videos of us playing, and the number of people that have said, oh, you know, it's so obvious, you're just so happy, you're having such a great time. And I mean, we are, but like every day we struggle and we cry and we like get nervous and anxious and we worry. And it's like all of life goes into everything we do, but often the bits you see in other people's lives make it seem like they're sort of strong and not anxious. So I guess, yeah, maybe that's not a positive message, but just to say we're all scared a lot of the time. And I think we need to be honest about that. And then I guess to turn that into a more positive thing, this feeling of adrenaline, I would say we have to kind of make friends with adrenaline. It's much easier actually to transform this kind of fluttery butterfly nerves into positive excitement than we think it is. In fact, it's easier to transform from that than, you know, we can't always be perfectly calm, but it's not a very big leap between this like, and actually, this is so exciting, and it's a bit of a kick of something I haven't experienced in the rehearsal, but it's amazingly exciting. And I think the other thing that we've all maybe had a chance to reflect on a bit more in this time is the things that really matter, you know, and sometimes we spend so long worrying about things that just aren't important, you know, oh, I've played a wrong note, or I've had a little memory lapse, whatever. I mean, and actually, the more time we have to think about those things, the more, who cares? And actually, when we're performing, what we're really wanting to do is take people on a journey, take people to a better place. My God, we all need to be transported to a better place at the moment. So I think just remembering those things that are important and letting go of the things that, you know, we all get caught up about, but actually don't matter at all, you know. And I think just this sense we're all in it together. We all want to be journeying to happier places. That was very rambling, but that's
not at all. Zero ramble, and extremely uplifting, but also honest. You know, I know you both well, and I look at those videos, and I'm sure that you're just having a load of fun, and that it's not stressful. Like the presence of the presentation of those videos convinces me of that fact, even though I know that of course you will be experiencing lots of conflicting things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, just a few added thoughts about that, which is that I think both myself and Lara are going to be assessing during this time how we can provide more and more environments for which this can be helpful and can be a kind of progression for people in terms of overcoming that sense of nervousness or insecurity. And actually there is something about how we can communicate with people in a time when our time each day is not consumed by the things that you can physically usually do. And I think we have to use that really wisely. So this is a good time for a dialogue on another level. I think also just assessing our objectives, just like Tom said at the end, you know, that the risk of performance as being something has to be something to embrace, and that we practice before going on stage the act of sinking into risk and finding it enticing and interesting, and finding diversity of sound and of how we play interesting and intriguing, and something that we want more of, as opposed to a continuous homogenization of everything that, well, if I sound just a bit more like that one or a bit more like that recording, then that will be better. Like, in terms of us all creating collectively an image for what we want classical music performance not just to look like in an industrial sense, but to sound like in 10 years' time in an artistic sense? What do we want our concert halls to be filled with? And, you know, I often talk about the fact that I play however many concertos per year. I mean, I'm just like on a constant tour doing it, and they're with orchestras from all over the world. And my basic experience is that people play incredibly well and incredibly accurately everywhere. Like there's barely an orchestra that I'm playing with that doesn't like tick all the boxes in a performance. And sometimes you're sort of left at the end going, but like, what just happened? Like everything was done really well. Excellent, you know? And I think it's always up to individuals and individuals turning into a collective to create a movement of change and to be creative within something that is kind of weighed down and filled with tradition. So that is, it's up to us to collectively make that choice and to make those movements and to embrace new sounds. So with that, I think it would be great to hear from Lara van der Heijden, who is very kindly joining us today, who obviously has unbelievable experience performing and is the most beautiful cellist. And we'd love to hear from you, Lara.
Hi everyone. A bit like Tom, I'm quite nervous for this. I haven't done anything like this before, so excuse me if I ramble. Everyone's points so far, I think, have been super helpful. And again, as everyone has said, I think one of the most important things with nerves is acknowledging that everyone has them. Maybe like a handful of people don't have them, and I think it's quite weird. I don't understand how people can not be nervous for something. And I think I've struggled with nerves as long as I can remember. It's such a strange thing because as a musician, what is expected of you is inspiration and creativity in the moment, but you don't choose when you perform most of the time. Actually, more we do now with the social media stuff, but you know, when you have a concert, you are expected to go out on stage when you're expected to, and to deliver when actually you might not feel like it is really difficult. And it's been quite an interesting time during isolation where I've only really picked up the cello when I felt like it. And my practice has felt much more interesting, and I felt much more creative, and I've had much more fun with it. I haven't picked up my cello as much as perhaps I should have, but it's been wonderful to let it get to the point where I really felt like doing it. And through that, I discovered some new things and was really excited about it. I thought, great, now I can have this, and like I don't have nerves anymore, and I will go into concerts and I'll be fine and everything will be beautiful and great. And then I had to record one Bach suite live all the way through. It wasn't live, but it was recorded all the way through. And as soon as I turned on the camera, I was terrified, and I realized that all this amazing work that I felt that I had done was completely gone. And I think with that was the massive point about anything in life, but also with this nerves thing, is that it is not one big problem that you just have a eureka moment and then suddenly it's gone. Maybe some people will have that, but for me, it is a constant battle in a way, but I don't want to say battle, but it's like a constant tightrope walk between feeling the adrenaline, feeling the excitement, as Tom was saying, and not letting it overwhelm you. And I think the advice that I would give, or perhaps what I've been trying to do myself, is to focus on small goals. For example, not needing to come away from a performance going, that was the most incredible, inspired performance I've ever given. But coming away saying, actually, I played one phrase in an interesting way, or I wasn't obsessing over my memory slips the whole way through. Something where you, okay, I'm basically saying, lower your expectations, which is not good. But I think that the pressure of feeling that we have to be, inspired artists all the time is so huge. And actually, sometimes you can give a freer and more comfortable performance when you just focus on smaller things. And you know, one thing that I always focus on at the beginning of a concert is just my body. And that's something that Elena probably would be great at talking about. And instead of thinking that my first phrase has to be super convincing, I will just go, I want to make sure that I'm comfortable, that I'm breathing well, that I have a big fourth sound, because I think for most people, and for cellists especially, when you're nervous, everything gets very high up when you start breathing in your chest and you don't use your diaphragm properly. And a person called Alison Rind, who Nikki knows very well, she just said, focus on your bum when you play, which is quite a funny way of thinking about it, but it really helped me just to settle down and to focus and to ground everything. And then usually it takes about a few bars until you're like over the main wave of sickness and nerves, and then you start to settle in, and then you can focus on musicians around you, which I find really helpful as well. What I notice about myself is that in chamber music situations, I'm less nervous than when I'm doing solo or when I'm doing concerto, which I know rationally is not good, because concertos are just as much chamber music as everything else. But it's that I know that the focus is more on me, and I feel like people will be judging me more. Which is, of course, also not true, because people come to a concert because they want to enjoy themselves and not to judge. I think most people anyway, apart from reviewers, but that's a different problem. And yeah, just zoning into the people around you, I find super, super helpful. Yeah, that's my few rambly ideas, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Lara. Yeah, I love what you're saying about the pressure of being inspiring all the time, and it's something that I often consider, because I'll say in a masterclass setting a lot, I'll say, you know, if you focus on higher objectives, those of being expressive or those of telling a story, that will diminish your focus on smaller technical or physical moments or hurdles. But actually, you're totally right, and it's something that I kind of second guess myself a lot with. That is that necessarily always calming? Because there is a lot of intensity that runs through your body when you're trying to express something in a meaningful way, and an intensity that runs through your breath when you're trying to be convincing this moment and this moment and this moment, and tell people this and tell people that. There's a huge amount of energy that's taken up with that. And I remember having this conversation with Jess Gillam before her BBC Young Musician, and we were talking about where to focus energy. And just like Lara was saying, those first few bars, to actually focus on one thing, on the sense of your body, and to feel inside the sound. And actually that is enough for your brain to be computing and for you to be dealing with at the start of a performance. And there are, of course, all classical music is a complex story. It's always rising and falling in intensity and in complexity. And actually to map out for yourself, based on your own experience of what you're likely to do in performance, when usually you get nervous, what happens to you when you do, to kind of map out for yourself a bit of an idea of when to give what and when to focus on what, when you feel you can give everything in your expression, but when actually lowering those number of things you're focused on, and just pure sound. That's all I'm caring about right now. That actually it will, like Laura was saying, get you past that initial overwhelmed state that I think so many of us experience when we go onto the stage. So last but not least, we've got Rachel Cooper here with us, violinist, musician, but also has an enormous experience in teaching, but also lecturing. And she, for our foundation, but in many different environments, has spoken a lot and given presentations on performance anxiety, and deals with this in the most beautiful way on a continuous daily basis with her students that range from 4-year-olds to teenagers. So Rachel, perhaps from both a performer's perspective, but from a teacher's perspective, are you happy to share with us some words? And you can't say
yeah. Thank you, Nick. It's so nice to be with you all. I feel extremely privileged to be talking with such amazing musicians. It's the first time I've met Lara, which is really beautiful, and Elena and Tom, and of course Nikki, and all of you guys who are performing so often. I cannot claim to be a performer. I would never claim I was a performer. So I am teaching most of the time, but of course I did my master's degree in performance science, the physiology and psychology of musicians. And I just wanted to say that this time during lockdown has been one of the most intense experiences I've had with performance anxiety, because I decided to do a load of Friday Facebook Lives teaching. And it was because the whole reason I did them was because I wanted to reach the students in the charity I work for, which I wasn't able to do for a long time because I wasn't allowed their personal details and I couldn't teach them on Zoom directly. So I thought, how can I do it? I know, I'll just make my Facebook profile public and then anyone can join. And I did this, and then as I was doing it, I saw all these, I'm a Suzuki trained teacher, and I could see all these names popping up of very, very good Suzuki teachers from around the world. And I just totally freaked out, like totally panicked. And Twinkle Twinkle became like this horribly, disgracefully hard thing to play. And it, you know, I know that you know what I'm talking about. It's like, I don't know how to hold the violin anymore. I don't know. Just wanted to vomit. And I had planned so incredibly well, you know, I have everything lined up on my bed so that I know exactly when, if I'm going to get a bit nervous, to hone in on here, or I know what exercise I'm doing here, and blah blah. But I didn't have any music, and it sounds stupid, but even book, you know, pieces in book 2 and 3, which I know from memory, I just couldn't find. And then at one point someone phoned me and it cut out, and I was so relieved. And then I got a phone call from this teacher in Belgium who has like become a bit of a mentor to me, and he said, get back on right now. I am not talking to you. Get back on right now. So I thought, I felt really sick. I felt this, you know, the sickness that you've all spoken about. And I thought, I just feel so fearful of looking stupid. And I got on and I did an okay thing, you know. And I'd spoken to Nikki afterwards, and Nikki was like, oh, great job. And I was so bad. And oh my God, I've made such a fool of myself. But I think the most important thing that I've taken from all of this, and I remember a comment someone made to me when I played my violin when I was little. And they said to me, I was playing Wieniawski's Opetas, you know, that really fun piece, you know, and I played it, and it was rubbish. I mean, it was out of tune and it was chaotic and whatever. And he came up to me and went, I just love your character. And I just thought to myself, do you know what? It's our characters that people want to see. They don't really care. I mean, of course, yes, there is that pressure to play the right notes. I understand that. But people want to see something unique from us. People want to see who we are. And that's, I know whilst that makes us feel vulnerable, but that's just so exciting because we kind of know ourselves best. And that's kind of something we can rely on when we're playing. And it's kind of like, I can rely on Rachel, or I can rely on Elena, you know, I can rely on myself to be me. I just think, you know what, I'm Rachel, and I only know how to do what Rachel does, and I'll just do that, you know. I think that for me helps me stay a bit calmer. But it's in terms of like an introduction to performance anxiety, that's kind of it. But I've got loads I could say, Nikki, but I'm not gonna, you know, steal any more time.
Oh my goodness, I love that story, and it's just, we all know so deeply how that feels.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing it with us, Rachel.